Welcome to the Down South Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Cruz, and this podcast episode is brought to you by onX Hunt app. If you are looking for new places to hunt in the woods this year, whether that be public land, private land, if you're looking to see the terrain features of the land you currently hunt, onX is the place to find all of that information. Highly encourage you to go to their website, check that out. You can also find it on your smartphone by going to the Android App Store or iTunes App Store and just download it there. You can get a free version, or you can even get a 7-day free subscription. Highly recommend you try doing that. As I've recommended to most of my friends, you're probably going to go ahead and end up with the elite version if you're hunting multiple states. It is just literally, I don't like cliches, but it is a game changer. Has been for me, an app I really enjoy using all the time. This episode, we're not actually doing an intro with Mike and I. We're going to go ahead and we're going to jump right on in with Tony Smotherman, the Travelin Hunter, and we're going to talk all things muzzleloading hunting. If you're new to muzzleloaders, if you're interested in muzzleloading, if you're just needing to get caught back up kind of like I am, this will be a really good episode to learn all the ins and outs of a muzzleloader. So tune in, check it out, follow Tony. Appreciate you listening. If you want to do us a huge favor, you could go and subscribe to the podcast. That way you don't have to go look for our new episodes. You don't have to wait for us to release it on social media. It's just always going to be there, pre-downloaded for you, ready for you when you hit the road or when you go to work, maybe when you even fly in an airplane. It's the way to go, and we appreciate any kind of reviews you guys would leave us. Without further ado, let's get Tony Smotherman on the line. And now we have on the line Tony Smotherman, the Travelin Hunter from Tennessee. This is Tony's second go around on the podcast. And Tony, we are just delighted to have you back on, sir.
Well, man, I'll tell you what, I appreciate it more than you will ever know. I promise you, man. You guys are doing an amazing job and glad to be a part of it.
Hey, we appreciate that. So last time we spoke, we got deep into all things whitetail hunting across the Midwest, a little bit of the Southeast, and we talked about muzzleloaders. Tonight, we want to focus in on muzzleloaders, but first, man, if you could just kind of give us an update on what's been going on in your world and the hunts that you've been on so far. And if anybody doesn't know Tony, we're going to put the previous show in the show notes. I can't remember what that number is. My bad. Mike, if you know it, you can chime in. But go back and listen to that episode, and Tony gives a rundown of his bio and everything about Tony Smotherman. But I kind of messed up my own question there, Tony. If you could, man, just get us up to date on what's going on in your world.
Well, man, I tell you what, it's still pretty early in the season. We're just coming into November now, and things are just really getting right for us guys in the southeast portion of the country, and even through the guys up through the Midwest there. But I tell you, I have kicked it off extremely early this year and been blessed to have gotten out west 3 times already and kicked it off in August. Believe it or not, we started in August down in New Mexico. We were just outside of Raton, New Mexico. And we were chasing antelope out there with the CVA Acura PR with the television show. Steve's Outdoor Ventures, a good friend of mine, a guy I work with every day through the CVA and Vagar brands, and got to spend some time with him out there, and was fortunate enough to lay the law down on a really good antelope at 192 yards in August. So we kicked it off extremely early this time.
That is cool. And I saw you on Facebook. You had a bow in your hand this weekend. What's going on? You turn into bow hunting?
Man, I tell you, my life rotates around hunting with a muzzleloader, has since the early 90s, and I know that kind of tells my age now, but I live and die to do hunts with a black powder gun in my hand. But there is times when there is not a muzzleloader season going on for me, and I am and have been kind of a diehard archer. Just my specialty, my main love has always been black powder, but I'm sitting in a walk-in gun vault right now that is loaded with muzzleloaders but I am counting on the wall 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 bows loaded, set up, a quiver full of arrows. All of them are tuned with broadheads. So I do have a lot of bows and am a big archer. I just don't pursue it as hard as I do hunting with the muzzleloader.
Well, I guess I'm gonna go ahead and join the podcast now. Thanks for coming on with us, Tony. I'm excited. We're gonna be talking about muzzleloaders on this episode, but I completely get it. If you do as much traveling as you do, I know a lot of times you're probably limited by different seasons and that kind of stuff with having to go with the archery tackle. So,
absolutely. You know, I think the greatest thing I've always loved about hunting with archery, and not to get too deep in the weeds, is but you can do it in your backyard. You don't have to have a 100-yard shooting range or 300-yard shooting range. All you have to have is 40 yards. So it gives an opportunity for a man to partake in outdoor activities if he doesn't have a big, long shooting range at his home like I would here to shoot all these muzzleloaders. But I really do love hunting with a bow and arrow, but my passion, like I said, and what we'll get into tonight has always been black powder.
So, Adam, while I was sitting there in silence, I was scrambling to figure out what episode that was. We had Tony on back in episode 16, I'm sorry. And we talked to him about traveling around to different states and that kind of stuff. But you and I had talked about this year we wanted to try to get deep into muzzleloaders and really focus in on that, because I know that's something when I first started looking at doing, I had no clue. And I would say now I have a little clue. So I'm hoping Tony can really help us dive deep into some of this stuff. Tony, I was hoping maybe to start out, can you kind of give us some of the nicknames and stuff for muzzleloaders? I know there's a lot of good ones out there. I hate to put you on the spot, but I feel like you probably got some.
Well, I tell you, I mean, you got front stuffers, and my favorite, which I kind of say it all the time, even though it's not as correct, I guess it should be, but I like to say smoke pole. That is my favorite, man. But your old school dudes, your traditionalist guys, they all call them front stuffers, just because you obviously have to load them down the mouth or down the front of the barrel there. So you have to stuff everything down the front. So a lot of the guys, when I first started out, called them front stuffers, and they were shooting side locks and flint locks and percussion locks and things like that. But my favorite that's a smoke pole, man. You light it up, dude, it smokes like a chimney, man. I still love that today. I actually spent some time with a good friend of mine here this weekend on my personal home range here, and you guys might know him. And if you're on Instagram, you probably have run across him. But Rick Taylor, he works for me through the CVA brand and does a lot of our social media stuff for us. He goes by TN Turkey Hunter on most of his social media pages. But we spent some time on my range putting a gun together for him here this weekend. And of course, I wasn't shooting. Rick had his gun out. We was getting him tuned up. But I was able to sit back and watch him squeeze the trigger and see that smoke bellow out of the front of that barrel. And it still gets me giddy, man, even back from when I was doing it back in the early 90s. There's just something about the smoke pouring out of that barrel. I don't know what it is.
Oh, front stuffer's a new one to me. I'm a big fan of smoke pole myself. And I know a lot of guys call them just black powder because that's what the season's called in a lot of cases too.
You bet.
And we know Rick well as well. We had him on back in turkey season, and now you got me scrambling again. Maybe Adam can look it up.
I'll go find that one.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry about that. I won't hold it against you guys.
Yeah.
No,
yeah,
Rick's a great guy. Rick's a great
Rick
guy.
did a real
I'm
good
glad
job.
to have him out to my range.
Yeah, his passion obviously is with turkey as well. So that's when we had him on to talk about that. But
episode 34.
Can you give us which one was it?
Episode number 34, Turkey Hunting Strategies with Rick Taylor.
All right, there we go. I guess maybe we need to stop referencing other episodes, though. Otherwise, it's going to be some bad audio, just us hopping around talking about our past episodes. Tony, can you kind of give us like a quick rundown of why muzzleloader? What's so great about hunting with a muzzleloader? What are some of the advantages, that kind of stuff?
Kind of what got me into this black powder craze is and we get this question a lot. What do you have to do to be in the hunting industry? I get guys say, man, outdoors is my passion. Hunting is my passion. I want to make a living in the hunting industry, which is a dream that I had a long time ago. And I know a lot of people have that same dream. And man, without dreams, we don't really have anything. So it's a great dream to have. And back in the day, social media and again, this is telling my age, social media was not prevalent back in the early 90s when I really, really started having a drive and ambition to make a living in the hunting world. So it was outdoor writing, was my avenue to get my name, my face out across the country through different outdoor publications and things like that. And the only thing that I could figure at the time, of course, there wasn't influencers like we have today on social media. Again, our influences were through the power of the pen. It's kind of what we called it. Being able to sit down, write a hunting article, get it published in a publication, and then people would pick that publication up, whether, it'd be at a hunting store or at a grocery store or wherever magazines are sold. And the only way that I could think of to be able to get magazine articles published, to get my name in front of people, to be able to pursue this career, this dream, this passion that I really had dug deep into my soul. I felt that I needed to write articles about big deer because I was reading North American Whitetail at the time religiously. And when I would see a guy in that North American Whitetail publication and he had a big buck he harvested in some state or the other, I was always driven to read that because I wanted to be that guy to shoot a big buck one day. And of course, us being from the South, there wasn't a lot of big bucks going on back in the early 90s like it is today. And so I figured, well, I'm going to write a hunting article. I'm going to have a big deer to write this hunting article so somebody will pay attention to this article and read it and therefore start my pipeline of this dream that I was looking for. But I knew that growing up in Tennessee, which there's nothing against that. I'm very proud of living in Tennessee my whole life, being raised on a family farm like I have. But we didn't have a lot of deer, didn't have big deer at all. All the big deer that I was reading about was coming out of the Midwest, some Kentucky at the time, but it was mostly Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, some Kansas too. And I thought, well, man, if I'm gonna be something in this hunting world and get some notification or notoriety about being an outdoor writer, I'm gonna have to go where these big bucks live, because if they don't live where you're hunting, you're never gonna kill one. So I got to studying these Midwestern states that were producing these big deer back then and still do today. I noticed there was a big problem that I was going to have to overcome because I grew up hunting with a Remington 270. I couldn't hunt with that gun in those states that were producing these big deer that I could go to and harvest a big deer and write an article about it. There was no centerfire stuff up there, and still isn't in most of those states today. Now those laws are changing a little bit, but you still can't go up there and hunt with a 270. There's either a shotgun or a muzzleloader. So I decided quickly in about 1992, if I was going to make any forward movement towards my dream, I was going to have to pick up a weapon that I wasn't real familiar with, and that was a muzzleloader. And that muzzleloader that I ended up picking up, I bought from a friend of mine for $50. It's some kit he kind of threw together. And it ended up being a CVA St. Louis Hawken, which oddly enough is the company that I work for today and have proudly worked for almost 9 years now. But I picked up that muzzleloader and I started traveling through these Midwestern states. And I started writing articles, which started giving me some notoriety that I was looking for and give me a leg to stand on when I talked to a manufacturer about wanting to do work for them. And I quickly realized that I really, really, really loved hunting with a muzzleloader because it gave me the ability to change and tweak in certain situations. I could go from 80 grains of powder to 90 grains to 110. I could go from a 300 grain bullet to a 250, depending on what game I was hunting. So this one gun, this one muzzleloader that I had, it was like multiple different weapons in one because I could do different things with it, depending on what game I was going after, whether it be a long shooting situation or a close timbered situation. I didn't need to shoot so far, so I could lighten my load. And I just quickly realized that it was a gun that I could do multiple things with in multiple states. And if I wanted to shoot big deer, I had to pick up that weapon and travel with it all the time. And it just consumed me over time.
So does that
make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So you kind of were comparing this with a shotgun, because in the Midwest, a lot of times they'll have like a shotgun season, or you could use a muzzleloader. What is the differences between, other than, I understand what a shotgun round is, but like a slug gun and a muzzleloader, as far as like what the capabilities and that kind of stuff?
Well, so I had this exact same conversation with some good friends of mine in Southern Illinois, where I kind of started, and it was my first run out of state with Southern Illinois, Shawnee National Forest, 180,000 acres of public ground that I had to use a muzzleloader on. And through a friend's first cousin's second cousin, I met somebody in Southern Illinois that ended up becoming great lifelong friends. But they were Illinois natives, so they grew up hunting with a shotgun. And I rolled up in there with this muzzleloader, and they're like, "What are you going to do with that?" I said, "Man, I'm here to hunt, son. I'm going to shoot one of these big bucks Illinois is known for, and I'm going to do it with this gun right here." They're like, "Why would you come here with a muzzleloader when you can use a shotgun?" They're like, "Dude, we got 3 rounds. Boom, boom, boom. You got 1. And if the weather's bad, you ain't got that." I'm like, "Well, that is a very, very good point. But my muzzleloader, it's only good for 1 shot. But that 1 shot, I can outshoot your shotgun 10-1. So back then, the slug guns were not what they are today. Everybody I knew was using a smoothbore shotgun, your typical 870, and they would have a threaded choke in it, which would give them a little bit of twist to their slug that they were sending. But it was a 50 to 75 yard gun 3 times. My muzzleloaders, I had kind of got good with them before I started going out of state, and I was good at 150 yards 1 time. And it kind of goes to the scenario is I would rather be extremely accurate 1 time and have my shot placement exactly where I know it's going to go, versus having 3 shots and hope it hits at 100 yards. So I just went over quality versus quantity was my scenario in that play. And my buddies up there just ribbed me for years about coming up there and having 1 bullet to make a successful hunt when they had 3. But I was extremely accurate with the muzzleloaders back in the day. And I just felt they were much more ethical than a shotgun. And every time I went to the timber up there during shotgun season, you'd hear boom, boom, boom. The guy would run through the clip or the magazine or whatever it was, whatever kind of gun he was shooting. He'd run through all 3 of them, where when I got ready to drop the hammer on one, no pun intended, I dropped the hammer 1 time and I recovered my animal and I come back home. I didn't need 3 shots. So I just liked them because they were so much more accurate than a shotgun back in the day.
So Tony, I think
today it's a little different scenario, of course. Guys make slug guns now, they're incredibly accurate, but back then I just wanted the most accurate thing I could put in my hands, and that was that muzzleloader.
I was going to add this. I started shooting muzzleloaders, man, at a really young age in my teenage years, and I think muzzleloaders have come a very, very long ways. When I first had my first muzzleloader, it didn't shoot worth anything. Like I had to clean, like if I shot it, I had to clean it. And now I know by like that 3rd muzzleloader I had, man, that thing shot really well. So how much range time did you have to put in early on to get that muzzleloader to shoot the way you wanted to, versus a muzzleloader of today? How much range time do you have to put in to get it to shoot the way you want to?
Man, that is a fine question. And this, just to step back to what Rick and I did this weekend on my range, he showed up at my place. He had a brand new CVA, oh Lord, Acura V2 is what he had. I was lost there for me, and I can't remember which gun he had, but he had an Acura V2. And from the first time we squeezed the trigger till he was zeroed at 100 yards was 5 shots.
Nice.
To figure that out back in the day, it'd take me 2 weeks. We were shooting full bore buffalo bullets. We were shooting standard GoX black powder. I mean, these are black powder rifles, but that name stems from the muzzleloaders of years ago. I mean, we legitimately shot straight black powder back then. It was a double FG GoX black powder, the nastiest stuff in human existence that you could shove down a muzzleloader and make it go bang. So it was incredibly inaccurate. You'd have to go through tons and tons and tons of different bullets. And then, of course, again, like you was talking about it being extremely dirty, they were extremely nasty. One shot, you have to swab the barrel 10 times to get it remotely clean enough to get another full bore bullet down the throat of that thing. So yes, there has been a huge revolution, and thankful for modern technology to get us to where we're at today with these muzzleloaders that we're shooting right now compared to what I started with. But over time, I got extremely good with it. And again, when I rode up there, I knew I was good to 150 yards, which in Illinois, if you've been there before, it's a lot of crop ground, a lot of open country. 150 yards ain't far, but it was a darn lot further than these guys with them smoothbore shotguns could shoot.
So it was 150 then. What can somebody expect now as far as typical range and accuracy for, an average shooter?
And that comes down to how much time that average shooter spends behind that gun. I can effectively tell you, and if you spent time with me on the range, you would see that this is as true a statement as it could be. I can effectively shoot mine 400 yards all day, every day, with a consistent group, with no problem.
Man, I can't shoot a rifle at 400 yards at this point.
That's crazy good. That is awesome.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this real quick before we get too deep. What muzzleloader are you shooting at 400 yards, or is that multiple different models throughout the CVA line?
I have two that I travel with quite often. So if I left today, I would grab a Accura MR, which is a mountain rifle. It is a 25-inch barrel, short barrel gun, wonderful three-stand gun, and an Accura LR, which is long range, and it is the opposite end of the spectrum from the MR. It's a very long barrel gun. It's a 30-inch barrel gun. But both of them will shoot 400 yards. One of them just does it a little faster. The LR has 5 inches longer barrel length, so you do get a little bit more muzzle velocity out of it. But accuracy-wise, they're pretty much identical. It just comes down to kind of fit and feel. But I travel with the MR as my number one and my LR as backup when I'm hunting whitetail. And then when I go out west, I typically do a LR as my number one and my MR as a backup, just because I do get a bit more muzzle velocity out of that 30-inch barrel. But when I was out in New Mexico a couple of weeks ago, I went out there with an Accura PR, which is a plains rifle, so it's kind of the twix between the MR and the LR. It's a 28-inch barrel, and I was out there prepping for 400 yards when I went out there. They will do it. You just got to spend time behind it. It's just like I got great buddies that their passion is archery, and I'm pretty effective to maybe not in a hunting situation, but on a target situation, I'm pretty effective at 50. And feel very confident that I can't shoot the same dot at 50 because I'll smash up some arrows or fletchings at least. But I know buddies that shoot 100 yards with these bows all the time and are scary good. Now, that is definitely stretching it. But these guys spend a lot of time with their bows, and everything is, every T is crossed and every I is dotted for these guys that are shooting 100 yards with their bow. So it basically comes down to how much time a man spends behind his muzzleloader is how much effective range he'll get out of it. If he spends a lot of time behind it, it will shoot 300 yards with ease.
So what kind of optics are you running on a muzzleloader that you're shooting out that far? I mean, you use like any type of the BDL type reticles or anything like that, or you have to do a little Kentucky windage?
No, man, just like advancements in muzzleloaders and then advancements in everything that rotates around us in the hunting world, scopes have grew so much more advanced than what they were years ago. Years ago, if a man wanted to shoot 200 yards, he had to hold 12 inches high. He'd hold top of the hair across his back, depending on what state he was hunting, on how big the whitetail were, but typically hold top of his back because you have a 12 or 14 inch drop at 200. With our scopes today, I got an array that I'm looking at here right now. Sightmark, Bushnell, Nikon, Leupold. I got a couple Swaros, but anything that has a drop reticle in it is going to give you an accurate holdover mark. Most of the scopes that is designed for a muzzleloader, Bushnell, Nikon, Leupold, they all make a muzzleloader scope, which in essence is a regular scope. Most of them are 3x9 by 40 millimeters. They just have a drop chart. or elevation reticles in that scope. So it gives you an exact holdover, so you don't have to guess, hey, just hold at the top of the hairline. It gives you holdover marks and makes shooting distance with these guns pretty easy now if you spend some time behind it. But,
do you think 3x9 is the way to go for most muzzleloader shooters?
I want to say that it's the most common. I would say if a man wanted to stretch it out to 300 yards, it probably wouldn't be too bad to bump up to a 12 or 14 if he had the availability to do that and it didn't hurt his pocketbook too bad. But I can tell you, let me see here, the scope that I was using out in New Mexico, and again, we were planning for 400 yards out there in that open country to hunt antelope. I was using a Burris Eliminator, which is that electronic range finding scope. Again, super advanced. But it has a 25 power magnification on it. So it definitely brung things in really close. But man, the scopes have advanced so much. Like I said, from having to hold over and guess to now this Burris Eliminator, you hit a button, it range finds, it tells you where to hold, you squeeze the trigger. So technology is definitely on our side if we want to stretch it out there a little further in some of those Western countries out there that we play in.
Okay, so let's start getting into the guns. For the beginner who's, never shot a muzzleloader before, is intrigued by everything that we've had to say so far and wants to buy their first gun, what are some of the main things that they should be considering when they're about to buy their first muzzleloader?
Number one, obviously, it's pocketbook. Depends on what their budget is. But I will say this. In our CVA line, of course, I'm obviously partial. I work for the CVA brand. It's Influencer Relations and have worked there for 9 years, or going on 9 years now. We make a Wolf, we make an Optima, and we're stepping up the line here as we go. A Wolf, Optima, and an Acura. Now, in the Acura family, there's a couple different guns that fall underneath that Acura line that we've talked about tonight. The Acura MR, PR, and LR. The Acura line is top tier, mid $500 to $600 gun. The Wolf is a bit more entry level. Not that it's a cheaper gun, it's just a less expensive gun. So it depends on what the budget is, where you fall from the $200 gun category to the $600 gun category. It just comes down to your pocketbook and what gun fits you best. The Wolf will shoot extremely accurate, and so will the Acura series. So basically, I wouldn't say, you got to have an Acura, which I'd love to see you shoot one because it has power windows and power door locks. It has all the bells and whistles, leather seats, heated seats, air conditioned seats, all that good stuff. But the Wolf will get you to the party just like the Acura series will. Just the Wolf doesn't have the power windows and the air conditioned heated seats, but it is extremely accurate, has a great trigger on it. It's just a little shorter. The barrel's a little shorter. The trigger's not adjustable like some of or like all the Acura models are. But it just depends on when you go to that gun store, which gun you put in your hand, which one feels good, and what you can afford. They're all going to be accurate for you.
Well, it's actually good to hear. I kind of think of the Wolf as you see him hanging in the Walmart or whatever, in the box, and it's like you said, doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but somebody's just looking to get into it. They don't have to have $500 even to get started. You probably can get everything you need to get for $200 to $300. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. If you bought a blue black Wolf and a clam pack at Walmart, I don't know what the price is on those there, but when you buy that, it typically is a kit with cleaning patches, some power belt bullets in there, probably powder measure, some cleaning solvent. The only thing you probably need to get would be primers and powder, and I would say that you could all day long get a complete setup, and that's a scope package with a scope. So just to back up a little bit, when you purchase the CVA muzzle, they come with a sling and rings and bases. The sling is a Quake sling, which we own, and the rings and bases is the Duracite ring and base, which we own as well. So we put those on those guns when you buy them. So you can get out the door for less than $300 after you buy powder and primers. And I'm gonna tell you, if you told me today that, hey, Tony, you can't hunt with nothing but a wolf, you wouldn't hurt my feelings, because I know it's going to shoot good too.
I was just looking real quick on Cabela's. You can get that clam pack you're talking about for $260. So
there you go, and you buy $20 worth of powder and $3 worth of primers, and you're set.
All right. So what about calibers? How do you decide what caliber to get? What should you consider as far as that goes?
Well, over the trend of years and development of where we're at today, there's been several different calibers kind of come and go, and your two most popular calibers are 45 and 50. There used to be 54s back in the day. Night Rifles at one time even came out with a 52 caliber. So 45, 50, 52, 54 was around at the same time. But the only one that has kind of stayed the test of time is the 50 caliber. You can still get some 45s, which 45 caliber, in my opinion, is an amazing caliber. Typically, the fastest muzzle velocity out of any muzzleloaders I've ever got always were out of a 45 caliber. But the one that is the most common that you'll find on the shelves in most cases is always going to be a 50, just because there's so many different projectiles out there on the market that different manufacturers make. So it's just kept that 50 around for a long time. It's almost like the 300 Win Mag of the centerfire world. There's calibers come and go, but that 300 Win Mag has stayed true. It's always there, and the availability for ammunition is pretty much anywhere in the country. You can find 300 Win Mag stuff. And that same kind of scenario with this 50 caliber muzzleloader. It's been around for a long time, and you can get projectiles or bullets for it about anywhere in the world. So I'd say the number one most common one out there is going to be a 50 caliber.
Is that what you're shooting, Tony? Is all your muzzleloaders mainly the 50 cal, or do you have any 45s?
No, I got a bunch of 45. Like I said, for whitetail stuff, 45 has always been my favorite. You can shoot a little lighter bullet, typically around a 200 grain bullet, and man, those things are super fast and super flat. We'll get into the weeds a little bit here, but a typical 50 caliber muzzleloader, shooting a 250 grain bullet, which is most common for people out there, you're going to get about 1,950 feet per second in muzzle velocity. I've shot 45 caliber muzzleloader shooting a 200 grain bullet that had 2,600 feet per second muzzle velocity. So they're super fast, super flat shooting. And I've always been a big fan, but it seems like the 45 came in really strong 10 years ago and was super hot as the Magnum muzzleloader. But then the old test of time, the old 50 caliber come back in, and it just kind of weathered the storm and pushed through where the 45 caliber went up, and everybody was all on it, and then it kind of went back down a little bit. But you can still get 45 caliber stuff now. It's just the most common one out there is a 50, and that's what I travel with today. If I picked up one here out of my vault right now, it would be a 50 caliber.
Adam, it sounds to me like Tony's got a little bit of everything. I don't know how many different kinds we talked about so far.
He is sitting in his vault, like sitting in his vault.
Yeah, I'm
yeah, right. It's not you didn't open up and look inside it. Yeah.
No, I'm in it. But it's predominantly muzzleloaders, and like I said, most of them are 50 cal. And with the 50 caliber stuff, man, like I said, there's a bunch of different manufacturers out there. The one that I travel with mostly is a 300 grain power belt. Is my favorite for these 50 cal stuff, just because it's got a lot of knockdown power. But if you had a young man or a young lady or even your wife or girlfriend that wanted to experience hunting with a muzzleloader, and you didn't want them taking the recoil of a 300 grain bullet and a Magnum charge or powder, that's the greatest thing I love about these. If that gun fits you, I can make a load to fit you too. When my boys first started hunting out, they started hunting with a wolf. They were shooting one pellet, which is typically a 50 grain pellet, which is what they were shooting. They were shooting a 50 grain pellet of 777, I believe is correct at that time. Either Pyrodex or 777, but either way. They were shooting 50 grains of powder, and they were shooting a 245 grain power belt bullet. So I lessened the recoil by dropping the power charge 100 grains, and I lessened or downsized the bullet weight by 55 grains, and they were effectively harvesting whitetail here in Tennessee, mind you, on food plots on my farm with 50 grains of powder and a 245 grain bullet. But if I wanted to take that same wolf and go hunt elk next week in New Mexico, I could upsize that to 110 grains of Blackhorn, 120 grains of Blackhorn powder, and a 300 grain Power Belt Platinum. And I could take that same gun and go hunt out west. Now, mind you, I'd have to re-zero, but I could take that same gun and hunt two different size animals. And so that's what's always been a driving force behind me. These guns are so adaptable.
Are there any states that you can't use the inline type muzzleloaders we're talking about, where you can only use the flintlock type?
You know what? To best of my knowledge, there's only one state that still is a flintlock style state, and I may be incorrect in saying this, but I will say this: the last time I looked into that question, Pennsylvania was the one state that still was sticking to primitive style muzzleloaders. All the other ones. Now there is Oregon, Idaho, and Washington, three of the northwestern states. You can use a inline muzzleloader like I have here today, or like what we're talking about here today, but they do restrict you on ignition source out there, and also restrict you on optics. It's rifle sights only, and it's got to be a musket cap, not a shotgun primer or 209 shotgun primer like what pretty much everybody uses now. So there are three states that handicap you a little bit, but for the most part, everybody acknowledges that these are inline muzzleloaders. They are muzzleloaders, so they still let you use them during those muzzleloader or primitive weapon seasons.
Okay. Nobody travels to Pennsylvania to hunt anyway.
I know. And they might have changed. It's been a little while since I looked into that, but at one time, for most of the time that I've been in the muzzling world, they did not allow inlines over there.
So what are some of the options that should be considered as what? We talked about some of the different lines, but then you're also talking about all the different bells and whistles. So what are some of the options that people should consider when they're looking at which model to buy?
So I'm the kind of guy that any purchase that I look into, you go, man, I can buy this item and it's $300 and it's the best of the best, or I can buy this item and it's $200 or it's $100. And yes, it'll get me by. And obviously it's a little cheaper on my pocketbook, but eventually at some point, I think human nature is always going to drive us to have the best of whatever it is we're looking at. So in my mind, I go to the best so that I don't have to spend a little money in the beginning, which eventually costs me more money, because then I don't settle for that one. Then I go try to get the best. So if it was me, I would only look at the Acura line. Number one reason, and I'm a big fan of the adjustable triggers on the Acura line. I sit behind some muzzleloaders that had 7 or 8 pound trigger pulls on them, and if you talk to anybody in the centerfire world today that talks about shooting long range and is a very adamant shooter and wants to be the most accurate that he can be and the most ethical he can be, you can bet he's probably replaced his trigger assembly in his gun to have a really smooth, crisp, lightweight trigger. If he hadn't replaced it, he had a trigger job done on it. So with that saying, you're yourself, no matter what kind of gun you sit behind, you're only going to be as accurate as that trigger allows you to be. So if it's a really heavy trigger assembly, you're going to have to white knuckle it and yank it, which is going to cause an accuracy problem downrange when you're having to just rip on that trigger. Where in the Acura line, they come out of the box about 2 pounds, 8 ounces. So they're really good out of the box. But on top of that, they have a flathead screw at the back of the trigger guard that you yourself, without going to a gunsmith, can adjust that trigger a half a pound either direction of where it's set at when we send it to you from the factory. So I have, my Acura MR and my LR that I travel with, they're down to almost 2 pound trigger pulls, which is phenomenal. So I like the fact that you can adjust the trigger on these Acura models. Well, what's the most common thing that everybody thinks of when they think of a muzzleloader? They think about corrosion and how nasty black powder is. No, I don't want to hunt with a muzzleloader because you got to clean it all the time, because that black powder or the black powder substitute is really dirty and it corrodes real bad. Well, if you look at our guns, if you look at them on the shelf at a quick glance, they look like they're blue barrels, but they're nitride barrels, not blue barrels. And nitride basically is the process that is on every black gun that you ever see. And black guns got their name because they're black, not because the United States military painted them black. It's because they've been through a nitride process, which makes them pretty much impervious to any kind of weather conditions anybody in the armed forces is going to see when they're out protecting mine and your tail. So we basically adopted what the United States military kind of did for these black guns, and we nitrided our barrels, which makes them impervious to any kind of corrosion. So when you see a Acura gun on the shelf and you look at it and go, oh, that's got a blue barrel. Well, it doesn't have a blue barrel. It has a nitride barrel. And the nitride process has it a dark color on the outside, also has it a dark color on the inside. So these guns today, if you have them out in the rain, they're not going to rust because they're nitride. And that nitride process, again, is on the interior of the barrel as well. So any black powder substitute or propellant that you use today will not corrode and pit these guns that we manufacture today. So if I was going to go to purchase a muzzleloader today, and a very long-winded answer to your question is, number one, I would probably go for the best, just because I know eventually I would want to end up there anyways. And the best has rubber inlays on the stock, soft touch camo, adjustable trigger, and then, of course, the nitride process on the barrels, which we've now introduced that into our lower, less expensive lines as well, because it is amazing on our muzzleloader barrels not to have to worry about rain, rust, and corrosion inside.
I gotta speak to that. That's I got my muzzleloader before we talked, Tony, and like I said earlier, I didn't know a whole lot about getting into it, so I bought one just with the standard barrel. And the first hunt I went on, you take a boat out to an island. I'm going to be going on that again this year, and it's part of the reason I wanted to talk to you and get all this nailed. But one of the other guys on the boat dropped my gun in the salt water on the first trip on the way out. So, I mean, ever since then, like, of course, I got, rust in like tiny little places and all that. I really wish I would have got some type of coating on the gun or a stainless steel gun or something, rather than just a standard gun, because it's been something I've been fighting with.
So think about this. You said a stainless steel gun. Now, several years ago, stainless steel was the best, by far the best, because it was stainless steel. Stainless is the key word. That stainless will still rust because there's impurities in the stainless steel that will cause rust. Whereas nitride, it is started out originally as a stainless steel barrel. When it goes through the nitriding process, which is a glorified salt bath, it pulls carbon. It changes the molecular structure of steel, basically. It pulls the carbon out from inside the stainless steel and basically brings it to the surface. So it's not a coating that's been put on the barrel. It's actually using stuff that's inside the stainless steel to protect itself, if that makes any sense. I know it's really hard to think about going through a salt bath and pulling out carbon, but it does. So that's why these barrels are coated on the outside and the inside, because it's not a coating we sprayed on, baked on, cooked on, burn on. It's just part of the stainless steel from the beginning. So the progression of the guns were blue barrels, then stainless steel, and now we're into nitride now. The stainless steel at the time was wonderful, but again, with technology, we found a way to even make stainless steel better, and that's by sending it through a salt bath.
Where do the coatings fall in there, like a ceramic coating?
And again, it's not a coating. It's part of the barrel. You can't cut it, scratch it, chip it, beat it with a hammer. It will not come off. Whereas a ceramic coating, you can get off there with a hacksaw at some point.
Okay.
The nitride is not. Again, it is a stainless steel barrel. And again, I'm saying salt bath. And I'm not getting into the weeds on that because it's a name that's about 4 miles long, way over my head. The Cliff Note version, it's a salt bath. It changes the structure of the stainless steel, and it brings the carbon inside that steel to the outside surfaces. So again, it's not a coating that we baked on. You can't bake this stuff on. It's part of the gun itself. It's part of the steel itself. So that's why it's impervious to any kind of weather. When we first started playing with this, was 3 years ago, I believe it's correct. So of course, in the South, humidity is a constant thing for us. So we took one barrel, we took it outside, and our facility is just outside of Atlanta, Georgia, down there. So we took one barrel, throwed it outside, basically in the yard, and let it sit out there for a couple of weeks, pulled it back inside. And there was a skim of residue on top of the nitride that looked sort of tinted like rust. And we're like, man, this stuff here ain't working. It's not what it's supposed to be. We took a damp rag with just a little bit of oil on it and wiped that film of what looked like rust discoloration right off of it. So in essence, it had rusted just a little bit, but it was just a film. It wiped right off after being laid outside in rain and humidity in Georgia for about 3 weeks.
Tony, we've talked about the progression.
You do that to,
I'm sorry, man. Go ahead.
I'll just say you do that to a stainless barrel, and there will be rust marks on that stainless barrel that you can't get off. I promise you. Because I got them in this vault I'm sitting at right now that I've been out in a rainstorm or snowstorm, and the stainless barrels did not come totally clean when I got back in and tried to clean them up.
So we've talked about the progression of the muzzleloader and the advancements in technology. How comfortable would you be in recommending someone to go out and buy a used muzzleloader? If they said, hey, I just can't afford to buy a brand new muzzleloader, I mean, what do they need to look for to make sure they're getting a good deal and be able to get that gun up and running the way they need to?
And that is a wonderful question, man. And I personally, obviously I'm kind of into muzzleloaders, so I kind of got a few that I collect. So I have bought a bunch of used muzzleloaders over the years. And I would say today, with the ability that we have across the line, and if you're not looking at buying a CVA, then I totally understand that. I'm just glad to hear or see somebody getting into the muzzleloading world, and if they weren't comfortable buying a new one or couldn't afford a new one. Most every muzzleloader manufacturer in the market today has a removable breech plug of some sort. So basically, you can disassemble that gun, pull the breech plug out the back, and you have a piece of pipe after that. You can hold that thing up to light. You can see down the barrel. Whereas the muzzleloaders, what I started out with, you never knew what you got because there was no removable breech plug. So you couldn't see down the barrel. It was just a big 28-inch or 34-inch dark hole is all you had. So the muzzleloaders of yesteryear, I would never have bought a used one back in the day just because you didn't know. It was the unknown. Where muzzleloaders today with that removable breech plug, you can take it out and see if the barrel's pitted, the people's taking care of it, or the person you buy it from is taking care of it. So I wouldn't be scared of buying a used muzzleloader today just because you can really thoroughly check it out.
All right. Well, I think we covered the guns now. I feel like there's so much to get into. We could be going for hours, but we got to keep going. I wanted to start to get into some of the type of loads you were looking at. And I know you mentioned earlier the different types of calibers, but it seems like there's a million different projectiles that you could be using. Can we just talk about what some of the options are and what we should consider as far as what we're hunting, that kind of stuff, as far as what to use?
Oh, absolutely, man. And like you say, man, there is a pile of them on the market, which definitely can be confusing and costly. If you go out and buy a bunch of them and play with them and practice with them. I would say that the most common, and maybe you would correct me and when I say this, but I would say the most common projectile that a man would use today if he wants to sort of pick up something, he would buy a 250 grain bullet. Would you say that's correct?
Yep.
I'd agree.
So, and I think that what's driven that is that the muzzleloading scopes that you buy, we talked about them earlier. There's several manufacturers that make them. They'll give you a chart on what their reticles are set up for, and typically they're set up for 150 grains of powder and a 250 grain bullet. every muzzleloader on the market today is a Magnum muzzleloader. They used to be separated in category as a standard muzzleloader and then a Magnum, where a standard would shoot 100 grains and a Magnum could shoot 150. Well, every gun today will shoot 150 with no problem. And so these scopes have kind of pushed people to shoot the 150 grains of powder and a 250 grain bullet. In my world, that is probably the last load that I would ever shoot. Number one is you don't have to shoot 150 grains of powder to make these things rock. You know, man, when I go on a hunting trip, I drive a Toyota Tundra. I think it says 120 miles an hour on the speedometer. But typically, I think it handles pretty good about 65 or 70. I don't think it handles too good at 120. And that's kind of the same scenario that I put behind these muzzleloaders, you know, with talking powder charges. In most cases, 150 grains of powder is always going to be too much. It seems to push these bullets too hard, making them a bit more erratic. Yes, you probably get more muzzle velocity out of them with 150 grains of powder, of course. But I think it pushes a lot of these projectiles too hard, which kills your accuracy. The two most common projectiles out there, number one is one with a gas check at the back and one with a sabot. In redneck terminology, we call it a sabot, and that's what I grew up.
Oh, that's what we're talking about. Because I was like, what's
sabot?
I've been saying that wrong for a long time.
Yeah. Well, I did too. I got corrected by the people who make sabots. There's one manufacturer out there that pretty much makes all the sabots or sabots in the world. That gentleman I've known that owns it, I've known him for quite a long time, and I got corrected pretty quickly when I hung around him for a bit. Goes, bro, if you're gonna talk about my product, at least say it right. I'm like, oh, cool. I didn't know that. My bad. Sorry. So there's sabot projectiles, which is basically a plastic sleeve that goes around the bullet, and basically it's a shim. So it enables you to shoot less than a full bore bullet. In most cases, all sabot projectiles are a 44 or 45 caliber bullet, and then the sabot takes up that extra space in there to make it a 50 caliber. So you get to shoot a smaller outside diameter projectile, or you have the company like Powerbelt that is a full bore projectile that has a gas check at the back of the bullet. And basically the sabot and the gas check is the buffer between the powder charge and the bullet itself. And that's when you ignite the powder charge and the explosion happens, basically that sabot and that gas check on the back of the Powerbelt stops that explosion from going past the bullet before the bullet takes off. So there's two common things out there, the sabot and the gas check, and it just depends on, it kind of comes down to personal preference. Man, I shoot all shapes and sizes of the Powerbelts. In years past, I've shot a lot of sabots too. And I know guys, I'm on a lot of muzzleloader forums, and I see guys that are just diehard Powerbelt with the gas check style bullet fans. Then I see guys on the other end of the spectrum that are diehard sabot fans. And I guess it just comes down to who got you into muzzleloading and what they like best. It's kind of like your dad. If he drove a Ford, you probably like a Ford. Same kind of scenario. I like the Powerbelt for the reason that when I shoot a 300 grain bullet, it is a full bore 300 grain bullet. Lots of knockdown power. And we talked earlier too about this, and we have one shot to make our hunt of a lifetime come true. And I want the biggest, honkingest bullet I can get, because the smaller, lightweight sabot bullets, again, typically 44 or 45 caliber, I don't think they have as much kinetic energy as my 300 grain full bore Powerbelt Platinum. So when we're talking kinetic energy, we got one shot. We need to hit them like a dump truck as hard as we can. And one thing to keep in mind too is where the guys in the centerfire world, they're shooting 150 grain, 180 grain bullet, but they're shooting them at 3,000 feet per second. So when they hit an animal, they don't really have the kinetic energy we have, but they hit them so fast that they basically vaporize the internal working components of any animal that we're after. Whereas we kind of hit you slow and really hard. So I like that Power Belt 300 grain bullet just because it's got a ton of knockdown power, and that's what I need because I got one shot to make it happen.
I got to ask you, Tony, hopefully I'm not putting you on the spot too much with this, but, and like I said, I'm no expert with this, but just reading through different stuff and forums and stuff, I see a lot of guys mention with the power belts of them coming apart when they hit something. Is that something where somebody's doing something wrong, or is, they're just not understanding what's happening, or it's just a bad reputation that's not true, or what's the deal with that?
Well, and it comes down to powder charge. So a Power Belt Platinum, which is the one I travel with, my Antelope, I downsized my bullet to a 270 just because I didn't need a 300. Again, the awesome ability to hunt with a muzzle, you can up and downsize projectiles depending on what game. But I was hunting with a 270 for Antelope, and anything else I hunt always has a 300 grain bullet. The original Power Belts that we started out with years ago was a solid copper bullet. The solid copper is a soft bullet. We have a bullet also, which is super popular. It's an Airlight, super aerodynamic, flat shooting, probably the best muzzle velocity that we get out of a bullet out of that. But they're not designed to shoot in front of 150 grains of powder. So the problem lies here is these guys are, again, bigger, better. I can shoot 100 grains, I can shoot 150 grains. It's kind of the Tim the Tool Man Taylor thing. All bigger is better. Well, let's shoot 150 grains. Well, when you get to pushing that bullet that hard, and it's not designed to be pushed that hard, you're going to have effects upon impact that's not desirable. And the solid copper bullets, the Airlight, they're designed the solid copper bullet was designed the days when everybody shoot 100 grains of powder. If somebody has experienced that bullet coming apart, it's because they were making it do things that it wasn't designed to do. The Airlight was designed specifically for lighter loads, the 100, 110, 120 style stuff, whereas the platinum bullet that I use all the time and travel with, it has a platinum coating, which has made that projectile harder. So it is designed to be pushed hard and hit hard. So it basically has a controlled expansion, whereas the copper bullet of the Airlight, if you're just ripping it with 150 grains of powder, you can get it to where it would come apart, I would say. I use it as we recommend it. But if I'm shooting heavier powder for bigger whitetail or elk or mule deer, I will not shoot anything but our Power Belt Platinum because that's what it's designed for. It's designed to be pushed hard and hit hard. So if somebody has experienced something that is not desirable, it's because they were doing stuff with it that bullet wasn't meant to do.
Tony, we've been talking about powder. What types of powder do you recommend? I mean, are you using pellets or are you measuring out your own powder?
I've used both. If I use pellets today, I use an IMR White Hot. If I use loose, I use Blackhorn 209. It kind of comes down to the user. I'm really picky. I like to measure my powder out. I like loose powder. So here's and again, I'm not knocking pellets by any stretch because I know a lot of people use them, and I used them when I was hunting in New Mexico out there for this antelope that I did back in August. But I used to shoot competitively in Friendship, Indiana. They have a muzzleloader competition up there in Friendship every year in the middle of summer. It's 2 weeks of nothing but muzzleloader shooting in competition, and I used to compete there all the time. One thing that I realized and got to notice when I was on the range, because I was a hunter going into a competitive world, so I was using the 777, well, prior to that, Pyrodex pellets and then 777 pellets. But when I got there in the competitive world and was watching these guys on the line, they were measuring their stuff down to 87 grains and, 92. I think probably the most accurate load that I ever shot personally myself was like 67. But I was now in a competing world where these guys were extremely serious. Accuracy was of utmost priority. And I was like, oh man, I've been using pellets, shoots great. And he's like, well, we don't use pellets here on this competitive range. I'm like, well, you know, you're going to have to tell me why you don't, because everything I see from it, it looks pretty good to me. I haven't killed a dozen whitetail with it in the last 2 years. Works pretty good. And it's like, well, so let's break it down mechanically. And this is how I kind of put it out to people when I'm giving seminars about this same topic, because there's a lot of people out there that love pellets and they shoot great. It does take a little more time to measure loose powder. That's the downside. You do have to measure it. So it does take a little more time. But my thought is if you drop a pellet down the barrel, now again, we are being extremely picky. We want this gun to be as absolute accurate as it possibly can. And to make a muzzleloader accurate, it's all about consistency. And that means doing the same thing every time you pull the trigger. If you want consistent results, you got to do everything consistently till you squeeze that trigger. And with pellets, when you drop them down the barrel, say you drop 2 pellets, 100 grains, you drop 3 pellets, 150 grains. I kind of think of them like an Alka-Seltzer. Drop these 3 pellets down the barrel. Well, they slide down the barrel. You don't have to push them. So the outside diameter of that pellet, so we're thinking mechanically here, the outside diameter of that pellet is smaller than the inside diameter of that barrel. If they wouldn't slide down the barrel. Okay? But when they get down to the powder column, which is at the base of the barrel next to the breech plug, because they're 25 inches down this pipe, you can't see how those pellets have stacked up. Can you visually see that? You can't see that, right?
Nope. Yep. No way.
That's not consistent. You can't tell if the bottom pellet is to the left side of the barrel, the center pellet is to the back, and the top pellet is to the right, or vice versa. There's a million scenarios for that. Does that powder go bang? Is it accurate? Yes. Can it be more accurate? Absolutely, because you can be more consistent. Because when you pour loose powder down the barrel, now granted, you had to take 15 seconds and measure that powder, but when you pour that loose powder down the barrel, there's no guessing. It fills up every void in that barrel every time you pour it down the barrel. There's never no voids at the base of that powder column next to the breech plug. So does the pellets work great? Yes, they do. I shot antelope at 192 yards a month and a half ago in New Mexico. Works great. I'm shooting 300 yards. Works great. But if you want to take it that extra step and be the best you can be with that muzzleloader and the most consistent, loose powder is always going to be the most consistent because it pours down the barrel and stacks up at the bottom of that barrel identically at the same time. And you can't say that with pellets just because you can't see it. So myself, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to shoot a loose powder because those shooters that I shot competitively with on the range where accuracy meant everything to them, they always shot loose powder.
I've heard some guys talk about crushing those pellets down on the bottom too. Is that a bad idea or good idea, or if you're using pellets?
So the whole scenario when everybody used to load their muzzleloaders is they would you pour your powder or drop your pellets in, you push your bullet down, and you feel like you got it seated firmly against your powder charge, and then you would like slam the ramrod up and down 3 or 4 times just to make sure that bullet was seated. Yeah. Well, number one, it beats up the face of your bullet, and it's going to kill your accuracy and your consistency. But if you're doing that with pellets, or if you push your pellets, or you drop the pellets down, you push your projectile on top of it, and you just lay into the ramrod, and you just smash it, you go, well, if I bust a pellet, why would it change anything? Because it's steel powder. It just may be crushed now. Well, what people don't realize is there's binders in that pellet to make it a pellet. Basically, in layman's terms, there's glue in that pellet or in that powder to hold it together so it doesn't come apart. If you, in fact, break that pellet, that whole load is jeopardized because the makeup of that pellet is no longer what it was designed to be. Again, it's not consistent that way. But if you break that pellet, then your load is absolutely jeopardized. So when you're shooting pellets, you typically drop 2 or 3 down the barrel. You push your bullet slow, steady till you feel it just stop. Because those pellets are, well, they're little bricks. And it feels like that you've pushed that bullet next to a brick. It stops. once you feel that, don't push anymore, because yes, sir, if you break those pellets, it is a major problem. Not that it's going to cause any harm to you or the gun. It's just going to cause a major problem when you try to hit the same point of impact at 100 yards as you did with the bullet before that wasn't in front of crushed pellets. It makes a big difference. And again, it's something you don't have to worry about with loose powder because you push it down, and when it's down, it's down. You can't push it any further. You can't crush them. They're already crushed. So yes, that is a great read that you read there, because it's tough on accuracy when you go to crushing pellets.
Okay, so the last piece of the load, I guess it'd be the primer. How do we choose a primer? What are the options there, and what should we consider there?
Man, everybody today pretty much is shooting a shotgun primer, or a 209 primer. It would be how you would pick it up at the store, but it's actually a shotgun primer, except for the 3 states out there in the Northwest, which is Idaho, Oregon, and Washington. You have to use a musket cap out there. That's how they kind of, they handicap what the capability of these muzzleloaders we have today are. They handicap it with a musket cap, because it doesn't have a super hot ignition like this 209 primer that what we're going to shoot is. But there's 2 primers out there, and that you'll probably the most common one that you see on a shelf is made by Winchester. It's in a black box, black clam pack. It says 777 primer on it. And I've talked to a lot of folks, muzzleloader hunters, who think the 777 primer is just a name, but in essence, 777 primer is a diluted 209. So what was happening is, and the reason that primer is out there on the market is, if you shoot pellets, you'll notice every time that you squeeze the trigger, and this is something that we need to talk about too, but after you squeeze the trigger, you're on the range, you squeeze the trigger, again, going back to consistency, you need to make sure that you swab that barrel with a damp patch and a dry patch after every shot. One thing that you'll notice when you shoot pellets, there will be a burn ring at the top of the powder column. So where the top of that powder was in your barrel, there'll be a crud ring, or we call it burn ring, right there at the top. So where it ignited, just above that, there'll be this crud ring. So when you go to swab that barrel after every shot, that patch will inevitably get hung in the barrel almost every time, because it's hung in that crud ring or that burn ring. So Winchester designed this 777 primer in the black box to try to combat this burn ring. So they weakened the powder charge. What they thought was happening when you ignited that powder charge, that the 209 primer was so hot, it was basically scorching the powder and causing this crud ring, this burn ring. So they built this diluted 777 primer. Not my favorite primer in the world. A lot of people will use that not knowing that it's a weak primer, and they'll get hang fires, and they think it's something wrong with the gun, something wrong with the breech plug, and in essence, most time it will turn around and be their ignition source that's not hot enough, and you'll get hang fires or delay fires or just a misfire in general. When I go to the store to pick up a primer, I will pick up a Winchester primer in the blue box. Typically, you have to get them behind the counter, and it's called, the part number is W209, and it is a full heat source shotgun primer. I've been using that primer since probably 96, 97. I've used probably millions of them, and I've never had an issue with them. So if I'm going to send somebody to the store today, it would be to get a Winchester primer in the blue box.
Tony, I had that exact problem you're talking about. When I first started shooting, I got those 777s in the black box, and I was hang firing probably half the time, and I could not figure it out. And somebody recommended to me, I couldn't find them on the shelf. You have to actually ask for them. And ever since I switched over, I haven't had any issues with it.
Yeah, you won't have any issues with the W209s, but for a guy that's using a 777 powder or 777 pellet, that 777 primer will work for him, but in most cases, not a good choice.
Now, Tony, I'm kind of slow, man. That's what I think anyways. And I like to break everything down Barney style. So let's say that I went out and I bought me a CVA Acura tomorrow and I wanted to suit this thing up, excluding the optics. We're talking projectile, primer, and of course powder. What specifically would you recommend for me to go buy, brand and everything, those three items?
If I was going to go pick something up at the store today, I would, if I was a pellet man, I would shoot the white hot IMR pellets. That's the most advanced pellet on the market that we have our hands on today. And again, that's what I was using in New Mexico out there. If I was a loose powder man, one of the most consistent, most accurate muzzleloader I could possibly put my hands on and didn't mind the extra step of measuring, I would shoot Blackhorn 209 all day. It is an amazing powder. It is the most advanced powder, pellet or loose, on the market. You know, the history of muzzleloaders, everybody thinks these things are corrosive and nasty, and they can be. Not taking that away from them. They can be that. It does take effort to love a muzzleloader like I do. But the number one agent in number one agent in black powder or a substitute other than Blackhorn is sulfur. Sulfur is the corrosion factor in all the GoX black powder or substitutes, less Blackhorn 209. Blackhorn does not have sulfur in it. So number one, it doesn't stink when you shoot it. Number two, it is much less corrosive than any of the other powders out there. Number three, which is I always thought was a really cool factor when this powder was starting to come out, was it is a man-made powder. So it's, in essence, a synthetic, if you will. So it's not hydroscopic. Now, to break that down in Barney terms, like he was talking about there, brother, means it don't absorb moisture. And moisture is a huge enemy for a muzzleloader hunter. You know, and I don't hunt in the rain a whole lot or blinding snowstorms if I can help it, but it happens. And again, I want to be the most effective I can be out there when I have, 5 days away from home on a hunt, money wrapped up in travel, money wrapped up in tags, time away from work. I want to be the most effective I can be, and that's Blackhorn in my book because of the hydroscopic. I think sells me on it because I don't have to worry about moisture inhibiting the performance of my muzzleloader with Blackhorn. So it's really pretty cool. And if I had to pick a certain projectile, we'll stay with pick a weight of bullet. It would always be a 300 grain bullet if I had to go pick one today. If I was hunting armadillos or elephants, I'd shoot a 300 grain bullet. People, again, 250 grain bullet is super common, super popular. I have shot a gazillion of them over my years of hunting with muzzleloaders. But the 300 grain is by far the better choice. And here's the reason why mechanically. Number one, a 300 grain bullet is not fatter than a 250 grain bullet in 50 caliber. If it was fatter, you couldn't get it down the barrel. So a 300 grain bullet is always going to be longer than a 250 grain bullet. So you remember the days when, and this talks archery here just a second, but you remember the days when everybody used to shoot an overdraw on their bow and they shot these really short arrows because they were super fast and they didn't have to judge yardage as much. You remember that?
Yep.
Well, same scenario. Well, the overdraws has kind of went away and everybody's back to shooting full-length arrows. The reason behind it is, and I'm sitting here looking at a full-length arrow, I've been spin testing here for the last couple of days here on my bench here. The longer arrows, because they're longer, they stabilize better in flight, giving you more accuracy downrange. That's the same principle that a 300 grain bullet versus a 250 grain bullet. A 300 grain bullet is longer than a 250. So it's going to stabilize better in flight because it's longer, and it's going to hold its kinetic energy longer at distance. Again, we'll break down that just a little bit. So here's one thing that, man, you can argue with people till you're blue in the face, and eventually they get it, but it doesn't make sense when you first talk about it. If you want to shoot long distance, that 300 grain bullet is going to be your man, because it keeps its forward moving inertia longer than a 250 grain bullet. So if I was shooting a 250 grain bullet and a 300 grain bullet at 200 yards, the 300 grain bullet shoots flatter than the lighter bullet does. And you go, oh, there's no way a heavy bullet can shoot flatter. It's heavier. It's going to fall faster. Well, the mechanic side of it is that bullet, once you get it coming out of the barrel at 2,000 feet per second, and that 250 grain bullet is traveling out of that barrel at 250 or 2,000 feet per second, that heavier bullet is going to hold that speed and moving inertia longer. So the heavier bullet shoots flatter at long range. So the heavier bullet is longer, so it stabilizes better in flight. It's going to give you better accuracy. It holds its moving inertia longer, so at longer distances, it's going to shoot flatter. And because it's a heavier bullet, it also has more kinetic energy. So it has three positives over a 250. So if I was going to go today, I would no doubt buy a 300 grain bullet, and I would no doubt shoot loose Blackhorn 209, just because I want that gun to shoot as good as it possibly can. And those two pieces make it happen.
One quick thing with the 250 versus the 300, I'm just sitting here thinking about this, and I think what you just shared with us, that whole thing was just some really good information, and you got me thinking about the bullet weights. Does it, I guess with a rifle, you're kind of limited to your cartridge size as to how much powder, but I guess does it take a little bit more powder to get the same feet per second on the 300 versus the 250?
It'll take a little more, yes, absolutely. Typically, if I'm going out west and I want to shoot this big heavy bullet and I want the most I can get, I'll shoot 120 grains of Blackhorn, where other cases I'm shooting 110 to 115. So yeah,
I guess the nice thing with the, I'm sorry, the nice thing with the muzzleloader is
I can measure it too.
Yeah, sorry, with a bad time in there. I guess the nice thing with the muzzleloader is you can change it how you want, versus you're kind of I guess those guys that load their own rounds, but you're still limited space wise. A muzzleloader, if you want to add an extra 10 grains, go ahead.
Agreed, absolutely, and that 10 grains does make a difference, and that's one of the biggest limitations that guys that shoot pellets have. They don't have the adjustability to be able to tweak that. You know, muzzleloaders are like shotguns. If you have a turkey gun, man, some like 4s, some like 6s, some like 7.5. You know, you got to play with them to see what they like. And with the pellets, you got two choices: 100 or 150. Whereas with loose powder, I got 86, 92, 114, 120, 130, 135. I can do anything I want because I'm measuring it as I go. You know, so when you spend time on the range and kind of figure out what that gun likes, and in most cases, loose powder is always going to be your most popular because you can tweak it to figure out what that gun likes. Whereas pelletized powder, you just don't have that adjustment capabilities to do that.
So that kind of leads us into the next thing is the tools that we're going to need. How do you measure your powder, and how should the average dude that maybe isn't obsessed as you are measure their powder?
Well, you know, there's a ton of different measuring devices out there in the market, and when we talk about measuring, there's two different rules of measure, if you will. One is by weight, and one is by volume. Your centerfire guys that reload, and I do hunt with centerfire stuff here lately. I'm kind of starting to like this long range stuff. So I've been around some really, I guess, dug into the well centerfire guys like I kind of am into the muzzleloading well. Well, these guys, they're measuring, 76.3 grains, but they measure that by weight. So they actually take their powder, their smokeless powder, put it on a measuring scale of sorts, and then measure that out. And they're getting down to the 10th of grain. Where in the muzzleloading world, we measure by volume, and it's nowhere near as specific and tedious as measuring like the centerfire guys do. So there's a ton of different measuring devices out there, and none of them are scales. They're just basically a tube that you can slide another tube out of, if you will, or a plunger out of. And most of them are plastic nowadays, but I think I still use a brass one back from years ago. But they all kind of have a sliding scale where you can measure it out in 5-grain increments, so you can tweak your load width, and it's relatively simple, you know. And a lot of the guys that you know stick to pellets, which is again is fine, don't take the time to measure. But they say, well, you can reload pellets a lot faster. You know, in my rule of thumb in the world that I live in, I got 2 speed loaders. Both of them have been pre-measured before I leave my home or leave the lodge or where I'm at hunting at that time. I got 2 speed loaders in my hand. I got one that's got pelletized powder in it that I had to pull out of the box and put in the speed loader. And then I have another speed loader with loose powder in it that I had to pour out of the bottle into a measuring device and then pour in my speed loader. So there's one step in there more, and that's putting in that measuring device and then pouring in your speed loader. But the argument is, pellets I can reload faster. Well, you don't pull the pellets out of the box when you're in a tree stand. You've already pulled them out of the box at your home and put them in a speed loader. Same as I do when I measure my powder, I do it at home, not in a tree stand. So with that said, when I go to do that follow-up shot, if I in fact have to do a follow-up shot, I pop the top off both speed loaders. I drop the pellets in one or the loose powder in the other. They both load at the same speed. So there's argument thrown out the window of, hey, I use pellets because they're faster to reload. Well, they're not. You're dumping both of them out of a speed loader when you're in a tree or in a blind or wherever you're at the time to need a follow-up shot. So the pellets are not quicker to reload like everybody thinks they are.
All right, so I think we could probably talk about nuances of all these different tools all night too. So just in the interest of trying to keep things short, are there any things that you would consider, you know, either crucial for when you first get started, or maybe any like, you know, I guess maybe secrets that you got for somebody that's been around for a while versus, you know, you buy the kit and it comes with all the cleaning stuff and whatever. Are there any like particular things that you recommend that, you know, maybe most people would know about or somebody new just really should get?
Well, you know, there's a lot of moving parts, if you will, to hunting with a muzzleloader, no different than an archer that's bow hunting. You know, like I said, I'm sitting here looking at the arrow on a spin tester with a broadhead on it that I'm trying to get the fly correct. Over time, and if I was a new archer, I would be doing this. I just put the broadhead on the arrow, put it in the bow, sling it, hope for the best. Same kind of thing with a muzzleloader. You know the principles behind hunting with a muzzleloader. You know, number one, you need powder. You need a bullet to put in front of that. You need to make sure that bullet's seated. And then you need a heat source, which is your primer, whether it's a number 11 percussion or a musket, depending on what state you're in, or a 209 shotgun primer. There's basic principles to all of it. Then once you get those basic principles down, you can start fine-tuning it. But there's one thing that I think is of utmost importance for every muzzleloader hunter out there. And I see some guys that do it. I talk to some guys that know about it. And then I talk to some guys that go, oh, my God, I can't believe I didn't think of that. One of the most important things when you're loading your muzzleloader is to make sure that bullet is always seated next to that powder charge, whether it's loose or pellets. And if you don't, you got a problem, basically. You hate to say you got a pipe bomb, but in essence you do. You know, so if you go out there and you got a gun, you're walking through the woods and you fall and you jam dirt in it, in the end of the barrel, and you don't clean it. You got basically a powder charge that you ignite. It pushes the bullet down the barrel, then it hits this dirt clog. You're going to blow the barrel up. You've seen that happen probably on YouTube, or you've seen pictures of somebody that did it. Not good. And that's the same thing with a muzzleloader. If you have a bullet and a powder, or a powder charge and a bullet in the barrel, and you don't have that bullet all the way down next to your powder, and again, this is not to scare anybody, just to bring awareness. If you ignite that powder and it's not firmly together with that bullet, you're going to ignite the powder. It's going to go boom, and then you got this bullet out there in front of it. You could cause a problem, almost like a dirt clog in your barrel. So always make sure that bullet is pressed firmly against your powder charge. And a way to know that is once you figure out what your gun shoots. Say your gun shoots 110 grains of Blackhorn 209 or 100 grains of IMR white hot pellets and a 300 grain bullet. Once you know that's what that gun likes, when you get that gun loaded, drop your ramrod down your barrel and score or scratch the ramrods. Typically, they're black painted. Take your screwdriver or your pocket knife, if you got one you don't like too much, and put that on the top of your barrel and rotate your ramrod against that sharp edge knife or screwdriver and scratch or score that ramrod so that you can always tell when that bullet is seated totally just by looking at your ramrod. You can see that scratch mark on it. And it's another great way to tell if the gun is loaded. Pull your ramrod out, drop it down the barrel. If the line goes to the tip of the barrel, number one, you know it's loaded. Number two, you know the bullet is seated. So that is, if there's a tech tip at the end of the day for a muzzleloader hunter, new or old, that don't score their ramrod, that is a must.
Yeah, that's really good and important as well. I guess while we're on that topic, is what else as far as safety goes do we need to know if we're shooting a muzzleloader?
Occasionally, if you don't, so the first thing I do when I get my muzzleloader out of the vault or out of the box or whatever the case may be, number one, I'll take the ramrod out, drop it down the barrel to verify it's unloaded. Because what will happen is that ramrod will go all the way down the barrel and will typically be flush with the crown or muzzle of that barrel. So you know it's empty, you know it's unloaded. And then if I'm going to head to the range, I will always make sure that I take a damp patch and my ramrod or my cleaning rod that's got a cleaning jag on it. I will run that down the barrel, let it sit in the barrel, take a primer, put on the breech plug, and then shoot that primer. And what that will do, that will verify that my breech plug is clean. And if there's any oil or grease or anything that's settled in that breech plug from it sitting in the gun cabinet, it will be blown through the breech plug into your damp patch that you have on the end of your ramrod. So it's going to catch any debris that's in that. So it's going to make sure your flash oil or your breech plug is clean and clear. But if you don't do that, and you pour the powder down the barrel, and if there's any oil or moisture in that breech plug, you could possibly have what we call a hang fire. That is where when you drop the hammer, the primer fires, but the powder don't ignite. It just snaps. All you hear is a snap of the primer, and there's no ignition. No powder is burnt, no explosion, no bullet leaving the barrel. That's just the primer. That's it. A lot of times it'll be a full misfire or it'll be a hang fire, aka delayed fire, meaning 2 or 3 seconds after you have dropped the hammer, primer snaps, nothing happens, and then the gun will go off 2 or 3 seconds later. I have had that happen, I wouldn't say multiple times, but several times over my 20 or 30 years being in the muzzleloading business or muzzleloading world. Doesn't happen often, but it can. So if you ever in a hunting situation or on the range and you drop the hammer and you have the primer goes bang, but the gun don't go bang, always hold that gun like it's fixing to go off for 10 seconds and then come up off of it. Pull your breech plug out, push the load out, start over again. But don't just let the primer fire and then come off the gun, go, golly, what happened? And then all of a sudden the gun goes off because there's moisture in the powder or there's oil that got trapped in the breech plug that went into the powder that caused it to not ignite immediately. I have seen that happen. It's something you got to be aware of. So if you have a misfire or hang fire, just hold on to it for 10 seconds and then come up off of it and break it apart.
So Tony, what are some of the common mistakes new muzzleloader hunters are making when they go out into the woods?
I would say the most common, to repeat that question, the most common mistake any muzzleloader hunter, not per se going to the woods, but if he's on the range, is not swabbing that barrel after every shot. When I first started out, I would swab the barrel every 5, 6, 7 shots. And I wondered why I never could get good, solid, consistent accuracy. But that's just because the last 5, 6, 7 shots I squeezed, the barrel was so darn dirty that it was a total different barrel than what I had started with before. And I got guys that go, oh man, I clean that to every 3. I don't want to clean that to every 1. That's kind of a pain. Well, it's kind of a pain. But again, we got one shot to be the best we can be with this muzzleloader. And it's, again, about consistency, something we've talked about many times tonight. But again, consistency is everything in these guns. So if you shoot that first, you're on the range, you squeeze the trigger, you shoot that first bullet down range with a clean barrel, you want every bullet that leaves your barrel to leave the same way that first one did, and that's with an extremely clean barrel. So basically what happens, especially with some of the older powders that are a bit more dirty, every time you squeeze that trigger, you build a film in that barrel. It's a black powder film all the way down the barrel. And when you clean it, obviously the patches are going to be dirty. But every time you do that, you create another layer and another layer and another layer. So if you shoot that gun with a clean barrel and then you clean it again after 8 shots, you got 8 layers of residue in that barrel. So basically now you're shooting a 47 caliber muzzleloader versus a 50, which if the bullet is harder to push down the barrel with a dirty barrel, it's going to be harder to get out. And when it's hard to get out, even if you're shooting the same powder charge, it's like you're shooting more powder every time because you build up more chamber pressure because it's harder to push the bullet out of the barrel after every shot. So I think the most common mistake amongst muzzleloader hunters and shooters is when they're sighting in on the bench, is not to shoot a clean barrel every time. And to drive that note even further, if I'm on the range today and I got it sighted in and it's shooting really good, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean the gun thoroughly, put it up in my gun safe, and then when it's time for muzzleloader season, excuse me, I'm going to load that gun and go hunting with it. Again, I cleaned it, put it in the safe. I'm going to go hunt with it next week. So I'm going to hunt with a clean barrel. Why would I want to sight it in with a dirty barrel?
Okay, so last couple things. As far as cleaning goes, what's I guess you just need to do like a thorough cleaning after each time you I guess either shoot it on the range or go hunting with it, right? When I'm
talking about, I'm not to interrupt you, but when I'm talking about
ahead.
Cleaning after every shot, I don't mean you don't have to break the gun apart. You don't have to pull everything out. You don't have to pull a breech plug out. I only do that if I spend a day on the range and the gun is thoroughly sighted in. It is ready to rock and roll. I will then break it down, clean the breech plug, and all that stuff. But when I'm talking about on the bench, shooting for accuracy, all you have to do is swap the barrel with a damp patch and a dry patch and then shoot again. So you don't have to break it. Now, I've seen guys that were doing that, like, I want this thing to be super clean. Well, basically, all you worried about being super clean is the grooves and lands or the riflings in that barrel. You want them to be the same cleanliness every time. That way there's no residue. That way the calibers and that's not getting smaller. But so on the range, on the bench, swap after every shot, damp patch, dry patch. When you're done at the range for the end of the day, then break it all apart, clean your breech plug and all that kind of stuff.
When you take the gun out for the first time after clean it, do you have to fire a fouling shot with your primer through that, or is that not necessary anymore?
Well, so I don't fire a full load through it. I will fire a primer through it. Again, I cleaned it. Most likely some people run a oil patch down the barrel just for coating. They will put that thing up in the gun safe, gun vault, pull it out, and it's going to be, for whatever period of time it was in the vault, it's going to be sitting on this butt pad, barrel up. Gravity is going to cause that oil that you put in the barrel to run down to the breech plug. If you don't fire a primer through that, you will have a hang fire if you put powder over top of that oil. So yes, when I have cleaned my gun, it's set up in the vault. I take it out for the first time. I will absolutely fire a primer, and I will have my ramrod in that barrel with a damp patch on that ramrod. So when I fire that primer, it blows any oil or moisture that's in my breech plug into my patch, and my patch catches it. Then I pull it out. Then I load it.
Okay. And that doesn't blow the ramrod out of the gun then?
Oh, if you're shooting a 209 shotgun primer, which obviously is the hottest primer that there is today, it will push the ramrod out of the end of the barrel 3 inches.
Okay. I mean, you usually just start with the ramrod right on the ground, or where you usually point it when you're doing that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely pointing in a safe direction for sure.
Well, yeah, yeah. But is the ramrod like flush against the ground? Like you don't have to worry about that?
Well, in most cases, I'm on a range by myself, so I'm not on a public range shooting with other people. So I point my gun downrange, ramrod pointed downrange, squeeze the trigger just like I was going to shoot that gun downrange. But the ramrod just pushes out an inch or two out of the end of the barrel. So it's not a harm situation. I just want that ramrod in there with that patch in there to catch any debris that might be in that breech plug. Because if you have oil per se settling in your breech plug, you put a primer in it, you ignite the primer, it does free and clear the breech plug of any oil that's set in there while it was put up after being shot and cleaned, but it just blows that oil into your powder column or into the grooves and lands or riflings of your barrel. Then you pour your powder down on top of it. Then your powder absorbs the oil that's now not in your breech plug, but is in your barrel. So you still got a hang fire situation or a misfire. That patch is to catch any oil or debris that was in that breech plug.
All right, so I got one last question, unless Adam's got something to add in. But a lot of times I'll be doing like multiple, like a weekend hunt or like this hunt on the island I'm going on. It's multiple days where I'm not wanting to fire my gun at the end of every day. Can I leave that gun, take the primer out, but leave the charge and the bullet in there overnight, or am I sacrificing a lot of accuracy by doing that?
No, man, you're not sacrificing nothing. If I'm on a 5 or 7 day hunt, and I haven't really hit any inclement weather, if I haven't stood out in a rainstorm, and again, a lot of powder I use is not really susceptible to water issues. My gun is really super anti-corrosive now. Not a concern. Still, maybe if I sit out in a rainstorm, I'd probably be safer than sorry and would dump the load and put a new one in it. But if I don't hit any inclement weather, no rainstorms, no snowstorms, I'd leave it in there for a week.
Tony, man, this has been a great conversation. I think for anyone, if that's a beginner, a novice, or even an expert wants to hear about muzzle loading and talk about different loads and just learn more about the muzzleloader itself and hunting with one, I think this is a great segment for them to listen to and probably a great refresher just for everyone. Man, I truly appreciate you coming on here and talking muzzleloading with us tonight. If you could you give us places where listeners can find you on social media or any other place you might want us to follow you on?
Like you had mentioned earlier, I've hosted outdoor television shows for years, and the last one I hosted was Travelin Hunter. All my buddies just called me Travelin Hunter for years just because that's what I've done. So pretty much every handle I have on any social media, Travelin Hunter is in and evolved around those names. So Instagram and Twitter is Travelin Hunter. On Facebook, it's TonySmotherman Travelin Hunter. But just Google Travelin Hunter, man, I pop up all over the place. But I appreciate the opportunity to be here, man. Black powder is my passion. Obviously, as you can tell, I'm absolutely eat up with it. I think it is a great opportunity to bring people into the outdoors. I think it's a great opportunity for people to understand how guns themselves work, because you get to mechanically load this gun. It's not putting, a 300 Win mag in front of a bolt and you slide it forward and you really don't know what makes that thing go bang. These guns here, for a new person, they see the powder go in, they see the bullet go in, they understand really what makes this thing work, because they got to put it all together at one time to make it happen. I think for guys that are into hunting with a muzzleloader, I think there is a bunch of opportunities across this great land for us to take part in. One of my favorite things in the world is going to Kansas. Most people are hunting or shooting their bows 1st of September to get ready for an October archery opener. Well, in Kansas, they have an early muzzleloader season, like September 5th or 6th or something out there. What an amazing opportunity for a guy that hunts with a muzzleloader to be able to go out there and hunt master groups of bucks when they're coming to the same bean field every night. The Midwest offers tons of opportunity. Nebraska has an amazing late season hunt out there. that you hunt over food source. Every deer in the world's coming to food sources late season. In Nebraska, you can do it with a muzzleloader. So there's a lot of great opportunities for a guy that wants to get into the muzzleloading world out there to really dig in and get some trophies on the ground. And if the person hasn't tried hunting with a muzzleloader, they're definitely missing out a great opportunity. For the sheer fact of if it's nothing more than just being the first man in the woods with a bang stick, you're the first man to follow up archery season. If you got a muzzleloader, you're the first guy in the woods with a gun. What an opportunity that is, too. So, yes, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. You guys are doing an amazing job. Thank you very much for allowing me to hopefully help push somebody into the muzzleloading world, because it is near and dear to me, and there's many reasons why, and I hope some other hunters across this great land see the benefit of hunting with these muzzleloaders and pick one up and go to it, because it's awesome.
You know what,
well, I know they will, Tony.
No
sorry,
doubt.
Adam. I know they will. I've learned a bunch just listening to, I've been, hunting for a few years with muzzleloader, and I tell you what, brought a lot of new knowledge for me, so I really appreciate it.
Shoot, man, I appreciate the opportunity, man. If you guys ever need me for anything, you know where I'm at.
Same
Travelin
here.
Hunter, any social media, you can grab me.
Hey, man, we appreciate the kind words, and thank you again for coming on. Thanks, Tony.
All right, brother. You guys have a great evening. Take care.
You too.
Good night.
And with that, we are out down south.